Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Redeemer Lutheran Church Bible study on the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 2. I'm Pastor Eric Kleinschmidt from Redeemer Lutheran Church in Highland, Indiana, and this is the second video in our Ecclesiastes online Bible study. I will put the link to the first video from last week, including chapter 1 and the introduction, up above if you want to play catch-up. All right, so last week we talked about how Ecclesiastes is most likely, probably, written by Solomon. And we'll see more clues to that as we go through today. In chapter 2, Solomon is going to embark on a test of what life is all about. And only a king of his wealth and stature could probably really do this very well. And so Solomon is going to say, listen, I had it all. I tried it all. Here's what I've learned. And we're going to gather some wisdom out of that. So in a way, Ecclesiastes is also a book of Proverbs. It's a collection of Solomon's wisdom. We imagine and conclude pretty much, I think, that Solomon wrote Ecclesiastes toward the end of his life or the end of his reign, and he has a more cynical approach to what life is all about and how he wasted a lot of his years. We're going to see that today. But there is wisdom of experience in that. And the thing about Ecclesiastes is what is truly wise often goes unsaid. So he's going to lay out the futility of seeking after earthly wealth, but he's never really going to come out with a definitive statement in this chapter about this is where true contentment, true joy, true fulfillment is found. It's expected that someone who is reading Ecclesiastes is acquainted with maybe even Solomon's other work or the greater witness of Holy Scripture that points out that true contentment and true meaning simply cannot be found in this life. They have to be found outside of it. And that points us in only one direction, straight up, right? To God. Because here's the simple fact that Solomon's going to come to the conclusion at the end of this chapter is that you're going to die. You're going to die. I hope that's not a surprise to you, all right? And maybe some of you watching this actually have a better understanding that you're going to die sooner rather than later because of some diagnosis or something that's happened or your simple age, those sorts of things. But the reality is that all of us are dying even now. And so there either is or is not something after this. If you don't believe that there is anything after this, well, then fine. I think you're wrong, but I can see how you could come to that conclusion. If, on the other hand, you do believe that there is something after this, that there is someone who is waiting for us, namely a God who created us and created everything that we have, to whom we will give an answer and account to, the next question is, who is that? I am going with the God who became man and then died and then came back and told me, well, if I've done this and you believe in me, the same will happen for you, that there's more life on the other side of this. That's the God I'm sticking with. And I could give you 100 reasons as to why I believe that. That's not the purview of this video here today. But I do believe that there is life after this life. And in fact, that is the life that we were all looking forward to and striving for. So reality from my perspective, and I believe from the perspective of Solomon here in Ecclesiastes, is this entire existence, these 70, 80, 100 years that we may have here in this body, in this life, this world, this planet, this universe, they are simply a waiting room, okay? And we're really waiting here to begin our eternal life with God, which is going to be even better. Now, this waiting room is a great waiting room. It has entertainment. It has good food. It has the companionship of other people who are waiting in the room with you. You have families, you have friends, you have activities, there's sports, there's beautiful sunsets, all of that sort of stuff makes waiting in this waiting room pretty good. It's much better than the waiting room at your dentist office with the view blaring on that nobody's watching, but you can't hear yourself think over on the television, magazines that people have touched that don't interest you at all anyway, and crying kids in the corner because they're in pain and they haven't been seen yet. That nobody wants to sit there very long. Okay. This waiting room, however, that we view of this life is pretty fantastic. And Solomon is going to point out that it's okay to enjoy those things, but always remembering that you're waiting for what's on the other side of that door. And that door is death. Okay. We are waiting for what the life that comes there, because that is where the party is. That's where it's going to be even better and grander and perfect without all the problems that we have. So Solomon's perspective and my perspective in presenting this class is that this life is a waiting room for the eternal life that is yet to come. And yet, that doesn't mean that we should just say, I'll just end my life here and get there, or this world sucks, I can't wait to get there, and your existence here is terrible. It may seem that way from Solomon's perspective at times, but he'll continually talk about finding joy in small things. So, think of it that way, that we're all in this waiting room, waiting to go from this life to the next. And it's a great waiting room, and we can enjoy things here, but we shouldn't fixate and want to stay in the waiting room. That's ridiculous. When the doctor comes and says, okay, it's time to come in, or when the hostess comes and says, your table is ready, you don't go, oh, no, that's okay, I think I'd just like to stay out here. No, you go, okay? So a couple of things for you to think about as we talk about Ecclesiastes chapter 2. Let's get into the text. Here at the very beginning, Solomon is going to present a great test of the world's delights, okay? He says, I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. That seems to be one of the great things of life, right? Just I want to enjoy myself. I want to have fun. I want to feel good. It's certainly the end-all and be-all of human existence that the world tries to sell us. You look around the world, and I routinely have this phrase that I use, that the best the world can offer you is the desire to consume, copulate, and then die. That's all it is. It's gather up stuff, have sex, and then die. That's like the message that we're sold on a daily basis. Everything in our world is saturated with it, and there are tons of people that buy into that as the entire purpose for why they are here, okay? I think there's a better way. I think the Bible presents a better way. I think we know there's a better way, and we confront that with every funeral we have. That, okay, so what did all that amount to? Nothing. Okay? So Solomon's saying, I'm going to set this experiment, and I'm going to explore the world's pleasure, and I'm going to see what happens. But right here at the very beginning, he realizes and reveals to us that this was vanity. And again, that word vanity, a striving after the wind, it's emptiness. It's like chasing smoke or trying to grab on to smoke. It's empty, okay? So he reveals the conclusion of his experiment right here at the beginning. He doesn't make us wait until the end. Verse 2, I said of laughter, it is mad. So who cares? Like, yeah, okay, yeah, had good times, but what did it matter? And of pleasure, what use is it? So it was maybe fun at the time, but is that the end-all and be-all? Because as soon as it's over, you're chasing the next one. Solomon realizes the futility of seeking joy and happiness and pleasure. Happiness, joy, they are the goals for so many people. And yet, they really can't be goals because they're never achieved. And human nature bears this out. And you know this, okay? We all have this idea. We just had Christmas, right? We got gifts, right? And like children will say, Mom, Dad, if I just get the He-Man Grayskull castle, then I will be happy. I'll never ask for another thing, right? It'll make my life. It's the only thing that matters to me, right? And so you manage to spend, I don't even know how much they cost. I mean, it's been a lot of years. So $100, right? So you manage to buy that and you get it and it's great. How long is it before you're wanting something else, right? Guitar guys. Got one guitar, got two guitars, right? You're always looking for the next one. Tool guys, same thing, right? Car guys, gun guys, gun women, right? Oh, I'm happy. I just got my personal piece, right? I don't need a, oh, no, look at that. Oh, I got to have that one too. It's that way with everything, okay? It's that way with possessions. It's that way with sensual pleasures, whether that be drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling, pride, prestige, the accolades of your peers, accomplishments, sports. It's all the same. As soon as we get what we wanted, we find that we need something else. So we're chasing after the wind, and yet we are continually sold, and people buy into the idea that life is all about just doing what makes me happy, even though we all know that that happiness lasts that long, and then it's gone, and then we're chasing again. So we're always going to be set up for disappointment if that's our end goal. Instead, the Bible talks about that true meaning of life, and the best we can hope for is not happiness, but rather joy. Joy is different than happiness. Joy is a pervasive feeling of goodness, no matter whether we are in plenty or in want, whether we get what we wanted or not. We can find joy in many things. Same thing with the goal is not happiness, but rather contentment. To be content, to say what I have is enough, even if I don't understand why it is enough. Philippians 4 bears this out. Let's switch over there for a second. Paul writes to the Philippians and he says, not that I am speaking of being in need. He's saying, I wrote to you about my troubles, but I'm not asking for your help because I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low. I know how to abound. And in any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I've found what it means to be content. I can do all things who strengthens me. People love that verse. They love to take it out of context and imagine that because it says so in Philippians 4:13 that they can go climb Mount Everest if God strengthens them. But what it's really talking there is about persevering through hardship and saying, yes, this isn't as joyful as I like. I'm not laughing as much as I like. But you know what? I'm sure that there's joy and purpose in this. And I'm okay because this too shall pass. And I will learn something from it. Contentment is bigger than happiness. Happiness is fleeting, but contentment is persistent and pervasive. And in that way, it is calming and it is helpful. So if we were to apply this to our own life, we would say, don't look and do what makes you happy. Try to find what it means to be content with what you're already doing and with what you already have. And then if something more comes, rejoice in that, but don't set your heart on it. So be content with what you have and receive other things with thanksgiving. And that is a secret to living a fulfilled life. Paul sees it and Solomon sees it as well. It's all through the scriptures. All right. So let's come back to Ecclesiastes 2. Verse 3. How did Solomon go about this experiment? He says, I searched my heart with my heart, how to cheer my body with wine. Actually, the Hebrew there is, I let my body go. I let my flesh be stretched out with wine is the actual verbiage of the Hebrew. I do believe that this is to excess. He's not talking about having a glass of red wine at the end of the day for his heart condition, okay? He's talking about altering his personality and his emotions with the use of alcohol. That's what he's talking about. He's saying, I did it a lot. And my heart was still guiding me with wisdom. So it's not like he's just, a drunkard running around. He's like, no, I actually investigated this and maybe he kept a journal. Okay, I drank 4 bottles of wine. How do I feel? Maybe that's what he's talking about. But he's saying this wasn't just dumb drinking. He's saying I actually had a purpose to this. In addition, how to lay hold on folly. So to seek what's foolish, he says, just not be so serious all the time. I thought, well, yeah, I'll drink and I'll just enjoy myself and see where that takes me. And he begins on this experiment. It must have been, thinking like, oh, this is going to be great. He does this so that I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. So 70, 80, 90, 100 years, Solomon, it's a few days in terms of eternity, of course. Again, Solomon is understanding that this life is a waiting room, right? Okay. So he's saying, I did these things to see what purpose there could be. Is this the end-all and be-all of human existence, to drink and be merry? He says, in addition, verse 4, I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. He probably planted the vineyards to feed his wine habit, right? I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of the growing trees. Do you see how this is expanding? So he starts off with, okay, I like to drink wine, and now I'm going to have vineyards, and now I need irrigation, right? And now he's saying, I need people to actually do the work because I can't do all this. So I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I had also great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had come before me in Jerusalem. So this is his great wealth. He's saying, I had it all. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of king and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines. Solomon, reportedly in the scriptures, had 1,000 women in his harem. I mean, just think about the space required, the food required, the garments required, the people to watch after all those children. All of those things Solomon had to add on. So it wasn't just I had a bunch of vineyards and I had a bunch of herds and I had a bunch of wives. There's a whole economy, a whole culture, a whole village built up besides that. He says all of this is like the goal of everybody, the delight of the sons of man. This is supposed to make everybody happy. Everybody looked at me and said, oh, he must be happy, right? So he comes to a conclusion here in the next couple of verses. So I became great. I surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem, and also my wisdom remained with me. So that gift of God that he was able to see and to determine what was prudent and wise, he's saying I didn't lose that either. So I had not only, personality and spiritual gifts, but I also had, material wealth. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil. And this was my reward for all my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done and the toil that I had expended in doing it. So he says, okay, so yeah, I gather all this stuff and it was meaningful while I did it. And I thought I'm really getting ahead and I'm really, coming into my own here. And then one day I stopped and I looked at it and I realized, what does he say? All was vanity. All was striving after wind. And there was nothing to be gained under the sun. So I got all this stuff, but it didn't matter. It didn't fulfill me. It didn't have any meaning because it could all be taken away. And when I die, I don't get to take it anyway. And instead, what does he have? What did he have in this whole process? He describes it as toil, not as joyful work, not as a pleasant hobby, not as accomplishing goals and growing as a person. He couches it in this negative term that actually comes from Genesis. So in Genesis, when God curses Adam for his sin of disobedience, he says, you will go from working the garden to toiling the earth. Okay? Work is not evil in and of itself. Ask anybody that has struggled with unemployment and is joyful to have work, or somebody that enjoys the work that they get to do. It's not toilsome. However, pretty much everybody knows what tedious and toilsome work can be when you don't enjoy it, or when you're tired, or when you're sick, or when you have a boss that you don't like, or coworkers that you don't like working with. You don't want to go to work. You don't want to be there. You can't wait for the clock to tick out and you can punch out and go home, right? That's toil. And that's a curse that comes. So man was created to work, to do things, to be productive. But what happens after the fall into sin is that's corrupted along with everything else, and work becomes toil. It's not as easy. It's not as joyful. It's not as fulfilling as it was when Adam was in the garden. Solomon borrows that word, that curse word of toil, and applies it to everything that he did and acquired as a king. And he said, I found no pleasure in it. Instead, it was drudgery. And as soon as I read this, I thought, Fight Club. You who know, you know, right? So in the movie Fight Club, the book, right? The things you own end up owning you. Now, whether that came from Tyler Durden or whether that came from the narrator who's imagining Tyler, or whether you want to ascribe it to the author who wrote it, Chuck Palahniuk, I'm not sure how to say his last name, doesn't matter. The sense of it is still the same, and it resonates with so many because it's true. And I would say it's Solomonic in its wisdom. You didn't expect you were going to hear about Fight Club on your Ecclesiastes 2 Bible study today, did you? All right. The things you own end up owning you. And look at what we have in the text, right? So he starts off with, I want to drink wine, so I need vineyards. Okay, well, I might as well plant some other trees too. And now I need irrigation system to water them. And I'm going to need people that are going to take care of that, right? I like sleeping with women, so I'm going to have a bunch of wives, but then I'm going to need like people to build houses for them. I'm going to need a retinue of maids to take care of them. I'm going to need bathhouses and cafeteria facilities and doctors and all kinds of stuff, daycare, school, right? It just balloons out. And instead of enjoying what he set out to enjoy, instead he finds that these things own him and he has to work at just keeping them going. So sometimes getting ahead isn't actually good for us. And that's some of the Solomonic wisdom that just happens to be also repeated in Fight Club. Okay, so we're going to now switch to the experiment has occurred, and we've come up with some conclusions there. And Solomon is going to revisit this and sort of elucidate and expand upon his experiment in the next section of Ecclesiastes 2. Verse 12, so I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly. I'm going to investigate everything because, well, I want to be thorough, okay? And apparently he has time. For what can the man do who comes after the king? So if the king has eaten every food that's in the world and has 1,000 concubines and has vineyards and zoos and all kinds of stuff that's supposed to bring happiness and take up his time, but he's found nothing, how can a man who gets paid minimum wage surpass that? So as a king, it's his duty to kind of investigate all the avenues that are at his disposal, and there's a lot more avenues that are open to the king than there are to the common man. So somebody that's going to come after me and try to say, well, King Solomon didn't find any pleasure in the world, but I bet I can. No, he's only going to be repeating the experiment that Solomon has already done. That's what he says, only what has already been done. Verse 13, then I saw, there's a revelation here, that there is more gain in wisdom than in folly, as there is more gain in light than in darkness. An epiphany. He's said, oh, wait a minute. Okay, so all this amounts to nothing, but there is a better feeling I have of doing things that are wise. And remember from our Proverbs study that wisdom is in attune with the will of God. That's where true wisdom is, okay? It's given by God, it's sustained by God, it's revealed by God. It's not just a earthly acquiring of knowledge, okay? So he's saying, I found that doing things God's way and the righteous way actually produces better feelings in me than doing what is foolish, quite disparatively, right? That's Solomon reveals his good moral heart in that he didn't rejoice in the works of darkness. Okay, instead he likes righteousness and he sees the wisdom in doing things God's way. So we're like, oh, he did discover something in this great experiment. Let's see how that plays out for him. The wise person has his eyes in his head. So he's realistic and he's looking around. He doesn't have his hopes way up here, but the fool walks in darkness. The fool is just kind of stumbling through life. And yet I perceived that the same event happens to all of them. So he's saying, I've found that doing the right thing, the wise thing, makes me feel better. And I think that that's a better way to go through life. But then I also discovered that in the end, both the wise person and the foolish person have the same thing happen to them. And what is that? Well, let's look. Verse 15, then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? What does it matter if we're both going to die? So Solomon is going to hint at death being the great equalizer here. He will eventually come right out and say it. But for right now, he's just saying the same event. Well, what is that event that is common to all man? It's death. And he's saying, so if my end is the same as the foolish guy or the drunkard down at the bar, then what's the point of all this? Why have I been so very wise? Everything I took pride in, what does it really matter if I'm going to die at the end anyway? And so he said in his heart, this also is vanity. Like it's empty. Everything is empty is kind of what he's saying. I've searched everything and everything doesn't matter. It's really kind of a depressing view. Verse 16, for of the wise as of the fool there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all will have been long forgotten. How the wise dies, just like the fool. So whether they're a towering intellect or an absolute imbecile, they both end up in the grave, buried next to each other at Calumet Park. So what does it matter? We can't make that the sum total of human existence, right? And we see this very personal acknowledgement of Solomon's mental health. Verse 17, so I hated life because what is done under the sun was grievous to me. Like I realized that it's all meaningless. It's a viewpoint called nihilism, and nothing matters. So just kind of go through life and just whatever. Nothing matters. It's a very depressing worldview. And Solomon is saying, I had it for all his vanity, the striving after the wind. We're all going to die, so nothing really matters. That's where he's at this point, okay? Verse 18, I hated all my toil. So the things that I owned end up owning me, and I hated it, much like the narrator does in Fight Club, and he's in that scene, he's saying, I had all this stuff and I just lost it. And Tyler is telling him, well, now you're actually free, right? Solomon is saying the same things in his own way here. Maybe that's where the author got the idea from. I don't know. I hated all my toil in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. I can't take it with me. I got to leave it to somebody else. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool? And what does it really matter if he is or he isn't? Because when he dies, he'll leave it to someone else. So yeah, you're holding on to all this money and you're going to leave it to your kids and they might do smart things with it or they might blow it on lotto tickets. Who knows? You're going to be dead. You're not going to care. You're not even going to be aware of it. And yet that person will be master for which all I worked for and used my wisdom under the sun. And so it's all chasing after the wind. It's all vanity, he says. So I turned about and gave my heart up to despair over all the toil of my labors under the sun, because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This also is vanity, and it's a great evil. When he says it's a great evil, he's not saying like this is unfair, as much as he's saying this isn't the way things should be. There has to be more to life than this. What has a man from all the toil and striving of heart with which he toils beneath the sun? He has as much as he came into the world with. Nothing. No clothes, no vineyards, no harem. He just comes into the world naked, and that's how he leaves. It's all he has. For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even in the night, his heart does not rest. This also is vanity. I want to talk about this in the night thing that comes up here. So, Jesus, let's go there. Jesus in John 9, he's healing a man who's born blind, right? As he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, it was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. And then he says this verse, we must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. And then he heals him. So Jesus asserts this aphorism that everybody's aware of. When night comes, the workday is over. Now you're talking about a time before there was, fluorescent lighting and stuff like that. So yeah, pretty much when the sun went down, everybody went home because you can't see anymore. You can't thresh the grain anymore. You can't harvest the crops. You can't, do all these sorts of things because, you don't have light. So you're basically forced by the rotation of the earth to stop working. Okay, so when we come back to Ecclesiastes and it talks about, where did that go? Even in night, his heart does not rest. So his workday is over. There's nothing more he can do, and yet he's still occupied about it. He's still turning over saying, there's got to be a way to fix this. There's got to be a way that I can make this happen. There's got to be a new hustle, a new way to get that money and move forward, right? I just got to figure it out. And then he doesn't ever rest. And that's vexation and a great evil too. It's also vanity. So I ran across this in a commentary I was reading that basically sleep forces us to realize that we're not in control. I mean, you literally go unconscious for hopefully like 8 hours in the night, and yet the world still turns and things still happen and problems still get solved. You might say, well, yeah, they're solved by other people who are awake, but things are just as out of their control as the other ones. And so I remembered a quote from Martin Luther that I actually have a poster of, where Martin Luther talked about, like, I really didn't do anything. All I did was drink beer and sleep, and God accomplished everything in the Reformation. So the actual, I don't know if you can see this here. I gotta get it. I simply taught, preached, and wrote God's word. Otherwise, I did nothing. And while I slept or drank Wittenberg beer with my friends, Phillips and Amsdorf, the word so greatly weakened the papacy that no prince or emperor ever inflicted such losses upon it. I did nothing. The word did everything. So all I did was drink beer and sleep, and God accomplished this great task. And so I've kind of been perplexed with this idea of maybe we sleep to let God work. Like, we want to control everything, and we think it's all up to us to fix and make happen, and then God hits us with sleep, and we can't do anything. And while that happens, he's still making the world turn and the planets in their orbits, and he's accomplishing things and directing them according to his purposes. The reality is he's doing that while we're awake too, but maybe sleep teaches us that we have to let God work, and maybe there's nothing else I can do, so I might as well go to sleep. That's an interesting, peaceful process and contemplation, I think. So the next time you're really worried about something and you can't really figure it out, maybe you should just sleep on it and let God work. That's, I think, one of the secrets to contentment and this peaceful existence that we've been talking about in Ecclesiastes, that we have to let God work. And maybe God makes us sleep so that we realize that we're not in control. I think that's definitely there. So when He says, all his nights are full of sorrow, his work is vexation. Even in the night is not rest. He should just go to sleep and let God handle it, is essentially what Solomon is saying. This also is vanity, this idea that we can just control things if we just work hard enough. And yet that's built into so many of us, all of us, I would say, to some extent. So here at the very end, we have Solomon's conclusion of his experiment. He says, there is nothing better for a person that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. From apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? It's a rhetorical question. The answer is no one. That true gifts and true enjoyment and true joy and contentment come from God, not from our own works or our own accomplishments or what we're able to pursue ourselves. It's not of this world. It has to come from somewhere else. Verse 26, for to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he has given the business of gathering and collecting, only to give to the one who pleases God. This also is vanity and is striving after the wind. All right. So this last verse, let's talk about that for a second. To the one who pleases him, God gives good things, but to the sinner, he gives bad. Okay. Now, who are you? Who is everybody? So do we sin? Yeah, we do. So we're all sinners. So we do have the business of gathering, collecting. So we're all afflicted with that chasing after the wind of even those of us who follow Jesus still think that if we just got the promotion or we just got the truck instead of this small car, then things would be better and things would work and we'd have it. We would have arrived, right? Even though we know that we've never really grown out of Castle Grayskull mentality from being a kid of getting something and then wanting something else, we still think that way. So that vanity, that chasing after material things is still a part of even those who follow Jesus. And so we are sinners. Do we also please God? Well, the scriptures tell us that we are pleasing to God because Christ has made us righteous. Christ covers over us. He adopts us in holy baptism. He makes us acceptable to God. And therefore, God does give us wisdom, knowledge, and joy. Does he give us as much as he gave Solomon? Perhaps not. Does he give us enough so that we can stop sinning and just stop setting our heart on earthly things? No, because our sinful flesh still clings to us, and even if God did give it to us, we would still choose that which was selfish, self-destructive, and sinful and hurtful to our neighbor. That's just the reality of who we are. Got to deal with that, okay? That's why we die, because we have sinned. So we have to struggle with the sinful flesh all through life. And so we are both saint and sinner, as Lutherans like to say. Simul justus et peccator, simultaneously sanctified and sinner. Okay, so God sees us as totally holy because Jesus died for all of our sins. We're pleasing to God, and yet the sinful flesh still clings to us, and we still choose that which is sinful every day. And so the Christian life is struggling between those two identities. And some days, maybe the saint part wins out a little bit more than others. But other days, the sinner part wins out a lot more. And I'll give you a hint. The sinner wins out just about every day with all people. So don't think that, you're some failure because you don't have very many saint days, okay? No, reality is Jesus himself says there's more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. Jesus says that knowing that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, so those 99 righteous persons don't exist. Jesus knows that. He's trying to make a point, okay? So we experience both. We have the blessings of God in this life, and we also experience the toil of collecting and material wealth and setting our heart on pleasures and things like that. So Solomon's great conclusion of his experiment is that there is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. He doesn't say work, he says toil. So he acknowledges that life is hard and it's not always pleasant, but the best we can do is find those gifts from God in each moment and rejoice them and enjoy them. He's not condemning eating and drinking and finding enjoyment in this waiting room life. He's saying, by all means, receive those as gifts, little nuggets of grand goodness that God throws down in the muck of human sinful life. Receive them and enjoy them. I told the confirmation kids last night when we're talking about prayer and what we should pray for, and that we should give thanksgiving to the things that God gives us. And we understand that when we give thanksgiving for food with a prayer, right? But sometimes it's nice to just tell God, hey, thanks for, in my case, I use the same example. Thank you, God, for Coca-Cola. I love just regular Coke. It's bad for you, I know, especially in glass bottles, right? Think it tastes better, or at least it feels like it should taste better. And so sometimes when I have one, it's a treat. And I don't just go, oh, this is good. I'm glad that I worked so hard to buy this $3 bottle of Coca-Cola, right? I deserve this. I say, God, thank you for Coca-Cola. And in that, I mean, thank you for all the plants and the materials that it takes to make this Coca. Thank you for the guy who invented it, and all the people who work to process it and deliver it. And thank you for the job I have that allows me to purchase this. So thank you for the whole thing, God. And in this moment, I'm just thankful for this small enjoyment in this sometimes terrible and stressful life. And I think that's where we start getting into the secret of wisdom and contentment that Ecclesiastes is geared for. Focus on the small gifts of God. Enjoy them. Take life as it comes. Leave the big things to God. Look at each place where you are in a day and realize that you are there because God put you there for some reason. You may not understand that reason. You may not know that reason or discover that reason. But God has a reason for putting you right where you are in that moment. So take what life brings you in that moment and look for the joy. Look for the good things and the gifts of God. And you will find that that is the best part of living this waiting room life. If you're always set on finding something new that's going to fix everything or make you happy, you're never going to find it. It's already right in front of you. Pay attention to the small things, recognize who they come from, and give thanks and enjoy them with thanksgiving. So all of that leads me to our remember points. Now, we did remember points with Proverbs, if you're interested in that study, but these have a similar thing. So things that I think we're going to continue to refer to as we go through this study. So number one, take life as it comes. Again, God put you there for a reason. If you always think that where I am is the worst place and I got to get ahead, I got to get this, then you're always going to be striving after the wind. Instead, if a promotion comes, thank God. If the opportunity comes up, sure, by all means, take it. Apply for that job. Take those risks. Great, fine. But don't set your heart on them. Instead, when you wake up, give thanks for the things that you have and the things that are set before you. And when things are struggling and life isn't that great, maybe then it's time to say, well, what could I say that was good about today? Even if that's just some Coca-Cola. Maybe that was the best thing about your day. Everything else was terrible. It sucked. But hey, I had a treat, and that was good. That's going to produce a better attitude, and it's going to bring peace. It's going to bring contentment more than, oh, today was awful. I just don't want to talk about it. I hope tomorrow is better, and I hope tomorrow that I get that raise and I get that free trip to Tahiti and I win the lottery and all that. You're setting yourself up for disappointment. Instead, take life as it comes. Enjoy God's gifts, the second point. And then 3, let God work. Basically, go to sleep. You've done what you can. You can't control everything, and control is an illusion. So just go to sleep and let God do it. You're literally unconscious, and yet God still makes things happen and still accomplishes great things and works out problems. I think looking at these things in Ecclesiastes, and again, they're not really stated, explicitly in the passages. I think you kind of have to just sort of peel back the curtain of all of this, Solomon saying, well, this is vanity and this was stupid and that led to nothing, and look back and say, but what was behind there that he learned? And when we do that, we see the wisdom of Solomon still shining forth. And his wisdom is about true contentment. It's about joy. It's about enjoying things in this waiting room life, but always having our hearts set on the life that is yet to come, where we will know the full goodness of what God has, where we won't have sucky days with just one good thing in them, but rather we're going to have all the days with all the good things in them. What a wonderful existence that is. And that's what we look forward to. Hope you found something of worth as you studied along with me. Again, thank you so much for watching, for desiring to grow in your understanding of the Scriptures and accompanying me. A lot of you have said that you are watching, sometimes even at work. Go you. That's really encouraging to me, and I really hope that you do enjoy your time as we study the book of Ecclesiastes. God willing, I will see you next week. Take care.